So Riot is running an experiment for the remainder of the NALCS 2018 summer split to allow strategic coaches on stage. Now, this has been after TSM switched Lustboy to head coach and Song to strategic coach. So it's obvious that TSM probably voiced their concerns, and I'm sure the rest of the league was in agreement. Otherwise, this probably wouldn't have even happened. But I don't think it's anything nefarious, and I don't think for some reason TSM is like this shadow hand behind the scenes that is just running everything. But I do think there are some clear advantages and disadvantages to this type of system. And for the most part, I do agree that this is better for the scene overall, but it just needs to be implemented correctly within a team atmosphere. Now, the clear advantages are that you have more knowledge on stage, right? You have two people that know what the fuck they're doing when it comes to drafting. So they're able to talk with each other and to devise a plan in order to have their team have the better draft at the end of the draft phase, right? Of course, this is balanced out by the enemy having two people that know what they're doing within draft, right? So it's this competition still of, two minds butting heads, but now it's four minds butting heads against each other. So clear advantages for that. At least we will see some higher level draft phases between two different teams. Now, there can be more ability to do case-by-case analysis or draft scenarios, and that one coach can focus on one portion of the draft and say, okay, these are all the cases in which I have accounted for, right? And you can only have so many fucking cases on a notepad as you read it in front of, this 60-second draft phase. And then there's the other coach that can have all the other aspects of the draft, right? So say if someone ends up locking in Morgana, it's like, okay, well, now my strategic coach has all the cases for if they were to lock in Morgana. So maybe we can actually pick Talon here instead of picking like a Morgana or something wild. I don't know, right? So it's case by case scenarios, right? And so you can have a more specific draft plan because there are two people that have even more specific draft plans, right? So it's a multitude of what you want to do within the draft phase. So I think that is the two biggest clear advantages. Now, what's up in the air, too, is translators. People have been saying that, oh, okay, well, now you can have a translator for the head coach, and sure, the strategic coach can be like, they can have some input on how the draft phase is going, but say if you just put a person for translation up there, I don't think that's actually a really good or sound idea, because there's just not enough comms room, like communications room within the mics in order to implement this. Because if a coach is talking and you only have 60 seconds and this guy is ended up translating for the rest of the team to understand, and then it goes back and forth, it's just going to take way too long, and you're going to lose very valuable seconds within the draft phase, which is very important. Now, a translator is important within scrim time because you can pause, you can say, like, this is what I want to do, this is what we did wrong within our draft phase, or this is what we did wrong within our game itself. But when time is of the essence, that's a really bad idea. I don't think that's a good idea at all. Now, the clear disadvantages of this particular system is, like I had mentioned before, is that you only have 60 seconds for oftentimes two picks, right? And so it's still a problem for the ban phase somewhat, but usually the ban phase you can structure and be like, okay, we're going to ban these three picks almost no matter what, unless they ban, one of these picks, then we'll just change it up slightly. But ban phase isn't that complicated within League of Legends. So you only have 60 seconds to pick two picks, so when that's all going on, it might actually lead to the two coaches primarily discussing what they want to do, because the comms will be overloaded with 7 people. I think that's way too many people to be talking at once to share their ideas and have like this democratic system. I don't think it's going to work at that point. So this is going to remove player input a lot. They might be able to say like, this is how this matchup goes, and these are kind of the counter picks to this if you want to pick these counter picks, right? And then these are the picks that kind of do well against this particular pick, but it's not necessarily a counter pick, right? And the 2 coaches will be able to take that input and just be like, okay, well, this is what we're going with. And they kind of discuss it amongst each other. And it's like, all right, well, do you want Azir? Do you want Victor? And they discuss between themselves, and it's like, okay, we're going Azir. Bam, lock in Azir. So this is probably going to remove a lot of player input. And not only that, but the 2 coaches are going to need good synergy for as funny as that sounds, outside of the game, people needing synergy, just talking. But I think it's somewhat of a reality. It's not the most paramount of concerns when 2 people are talking, but when, like I said, you have a 60-second time constraint, then it becomes a little bit more important for these 2 people to get on the same page. So the synergy between the strategic coach and the head coach, there's going to have to be some modicum of synergy in order to function as a duo when you're trying to get through the draft. And now this may change the West's fundamental aspects of how they draft. And this is the key point, is that LPL and LCK have been doing this for quite a while. And with this being a NA test run, it's basically showing to whether we can actually have this system function within our entire league. And this allows us to expand our ideas of how we're going to do our draft. And like I said before, coaches are going to need to have more synergy, and this might take power away from players in order to have what say that they want within the draft. It might actually just end up being strictly the strategic coach and the head coach deciding what picks that you play. And they're going to have to get more information on what picks you're comfortable with and the common matchups and the common counter picks of what champion and what other champion. So strategic coaches and head coaches are going to have to step up their game, but I also think it's going to take power away from the players and their say in the draft and kind of imitate what Korea specifically does with their draft, in that the coaches are kind of the final say. They dictate the majority of the flow of the draft phase. And finally, there's less excuse to fuck up in the draft, right? So TSM, you don't have any excuse to fuck up in the draft. You have 2 people now in order to determine how the draft phase goes, right? So if you have very good strategic coaches and if you have very good head coaches, there should be no reason as to why you fuck up in the draft. And this should also put a little bit more blame on the coaches themselves, because theoretically they should have more knowledge, therefore more say within the draft phase, and they should have more of an idea of what the hell that they're doing. So overall, I think this is kind of a good step, but at the same time, it may change the very basics of how North America functions within the draft phase. So I guess we'll see at Worlds. I don't know if this is implemented.